Hi, my name's Liam Miller, and today in this short documentary, we'll be discussing zoos and their controversial roles in the modern world. To start, we're going to talk about the very beginning of zoos. Zoos first became popular in ancient Mesopotamia. Now, these aren't the kind of zoos that we would think about when we think about modern zoos. These kinds of zoos came into the lives of rich aristocrats and rulers who would take animals from far across the world and create their own personal zoos. The only sort of backings that we have from this come from cave drawings, which detail long expeditions to bring back different animals like giraffes, elephants, or bears. These drawings can be dated back to almost 2500 BCE. We would later see zoos pop up through other ancient civilizations like Rome and China. The first zoo in the Western world comes to us through the Aztecan Empire, which was eventually destroyed by the Spanish conquerors, the empire itself, along with the zoo. All of these zoos, however, like as previously mentioned, were private and not access to the public, like many of the zoos are today. The first public zoo did not come around until about 3,000 years later, when in Paris, France, the first one was opened. In 1793 was the inaugural year of the zoo after the French Revolution. The people of France had recently come into an acquirement of a lot of animals from menageries, much like the ones from ancient civilizations that needed a new home. However, the earlier zoos like this one were not nearly at all what zoos were today, even though they are now public. Many of the habitats were far too small for the animals that lived in them and did not provide the basic needs that a lot of them needed. Since then, there have obviously been many great leaps and bounds regarding the overall well-being and upkeep of each animal in zoos. In the modern world, there are many different kinds of zoos that have opened since then. There's the typical zoo, where they have mostly land animals that are typically not native to the area, with habitats that can allow them to live with semi-normal lives. Then there are also safari park zoos, where most of the animals are free range and groups of people, whether they travel in large vehicles or in a tour group, or even in their own personal vehicles, can view the animals. There are also aquariums that are able to house lots of marine life that normally would not be able to be featured and seen by the public. All of these zoos allow the public to see animals on display and typically provide them with some educational information, but this comes at an extremely controversial cost. This controversy comes with two sides of an argument. One side is calling for zoos to close as they are inhumane and cruel to the animals who populate it. The other side is calling for zoos to stay open as they provide education and entertainment for the public and all of those who attend. No matter where you go around the world, there seems to be a lot of backlash towards zoos for a lot of different controversial reasons. One of the most common of these, even though there are a lot of accommodations made for the animals, is the mistreatment of them. Although less common in the larger institutions, which attract visitors on a national level, therefore bringing in more money, it is extremely common in regional zoos across North America, including the world. This mistreatment takes a lot of people who feel as though animals deserve to be treated better and radicalizes them. A statistic, according to In Defense of Animals, a group which calls for the better treatment of animals in zoos and release of those who do not deserve to be in zoos, claims that over 5,000 animals died in captivity in Europe alone in zoos. Being that there are over 10,000 zoos worldwide, we can inquire that these numbers skyrocket if they were to be taken on the global level. Even though this number already seems alarmingly high for a loss of animal life in captivity when they're supposed to be benefiting from this, these numbers oftentimes get skewed depending on the circumstances of how the animal lost its life. Oftentimes when an animal dies in captivity, it is typically just through aging. But unfortunately, this aging process gets sped up due to the fact that the animals are not being treated properly. Unfortunately, a prime example of possible mistreatment of animals comes to us from a very local museum in Rochester, the Seneca Park Zoo. The zoo has come under fire recently as a member of its nonprofit targeted the veterinarian of the zoo, claiming that he was mistreating animals consistently. Coming to us from RochesterFirst.com, this clip describes the lawsuit for defamation of character involving the zoo's veterinarian.
Suing the owner of the nonprofit branch, or the operator of the nonprofit branch of the zoo, the Seneca Park Zoo Society, for defamation. Dr. Louis DeVicenti, says Zoo Society President Pamela Reed Sanchez sent a letter to Monroe County officials claiming he was giving the animals improper treatment. An investigation found those claims to be false, but DeVicenti says his role at the zoo was reduced despite that finding.
The defamation suit, which was sparked by the letter posted publicly, included a detailed list of acts that the veterinarian allegedly committed, and it goes as following. The first on the list, provided by Rochester First, states that there was improper treatment to an elephant at the zoo, resulting in the animal's death. The next claims that he performed improper cataract surgery on a hyena on the wrong eye. The next comes claiming that he delayed providing care to an abandoned snow leopard cub so that it could be seen by zoo visitors. The last claim surrounding an animal is that he killed a penguin at the zoo by providing improper anesthesia. The last two claims in this claim that he falsified records to hide all of the aforementioned alleged actions and placed zoo staff and volunteers at risk by allowing them to view an anesthetic lion during a surgical procedure. Any of these, if proven, in my mind, should have been a fireable offense, since it puts the animals in danger and his job is to keep the animals safe. All of these allegations, however, came back false by an internal or HR investigation at the time of the lawsuit back in November of 2020. Regardless of these claims, however, the first on the list of the allegations mentioned landed the Seneca Park Zoo in the top 10 for worst zoos for elephants in North America. Coming in at number 4 on the list, there are obvious reasons that the zoo's location does not provide for the proper care of an elephant and many other African animals. Due to the fact that it is in Rochester, New York, in upstate New York, there is lots of snow annually, which elephants are typically not used to. Even though they are provided with indoor shelter, it is still not the same as being on an African savanna. The zoo had one of its elephants euthanized back in 2019 due to an infection in its foot at the age of 37. Considering the lifespan of elephants is about 65 to 70 years, this is considerably a young life for an elephant to live. Even more unfortunately, the average lifespan of elephants in North American zoos is about 23 years old. Pictured is the veterinarian at the Seneca Park Zoo, and in a statement to the Democrat and the Chronicle, he claimed that the elephant's median lifespan in Africa is around 38 years old, which puts the majority of the elephants at their zoo in the senior category, all four being around 38 or above. In my opinion, I believe that regardless of their age, that they should be living longer than their wild counterparts, being that they are receiving around-the-clock medical care and provided with food, but the system seems to be failing them, yet time and time again, as they're being mistreated. For this documentary, I sent a survey out to a random selection of 50 college students here at Nazareth, along with other schools around the country of varying sizes, with 4 questions in mind regarding zoos. Attempting to get maximum participation in the survey, I kept the questions brief and yes or no answers. They went as follows. Number 1. Would you consider yourself a fan of zoos? Number 2. How many times a year do you go to the zoo? 0 to 1 being the least, and then 5 being the most on a scale. Do you think that zoos serve an educational purpose? And then lastly, I asked them, do you think that if zoos consistently treat animals in a negative way, that they should remain open? The responses that I received to my survey were all pretty similar. For would you consider yourself a fan of zoos, 72% responded yes, 12 answered no, while 16% answered maybe. For how many times a year do you go to the zoo? The answers were a majority of 0 to 1 times, and the rest of the spectrum was very sporadic. For do you think that zoos serve an educational purpose? Around 84% answered yes, and around 16% answered no. With the last question, do you think that zoos treat animals in a negative way, should remain open? 86% answered no, and 14% answered yes. Many of the people who took the survey felt as though zoos should be closed if they mistreat animals or cannot provide proper care for them. Meaning that if they were to approach the case with the Seneca Park Zoo's elephant, the zoo would most likely wind up closing its elephant. Along with this, we can also infer that most people believe that the zoos provide an educational purpose, even though oftentimes the animals wind up being mistreated, and specifically in Rochester, have a great disparity between environmental differences in their habitats and in their natural habitats. This sort of predicament is what a lot of people are faced when it comes to their opinions about zoos. Although they believe that the educational purpose and entertaining are enough for people to consider themselves fans of zoos, they believe that if animals aren't being treated properly, then they shouldn't be kept in cages for people to view. When it comes to my own opinion, I think that there needs to be reforms in zoos all across the world. It seems to me as though the treatment of animals has been pushed aside in priority for the entertainment of people and somewhat educational purposes. In the case of safari parks, this seems like the best option for balance of care in animals and educational purposes. The animals are provided with the space they need to enjoy their lives while in captivity and being viewed by the public. The next on my list would have to be aquariums, because they once again provide the best educational purposes and the best living environments for them. The worst of all, in my opinion, would have to be the types of zoos like SeaWorld and circuses, and you see in the Netflix documentary Tiger King. All of these zoos seem to only display the animals not for what they really are, providing no sort of actual context of what they do in the wild. And they just perform acts constantly throughout the day, almost every single day of their lives. Overall, I feel like that could be the worst life that an animal will live in captivity. In the end, thank you for watching my documentary, and I hope that I could share some of my own insights with you.